This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's funny because it feels like this offseason we've talked more about the potential of Myles getting traded than we talked about him last year when he actually requested a trade. But nonetheless, the rumor mill persists. Now, if you're a Browns fan, if you're a Cleveland fan, and you're hearing people talk about Myles getting traded, this is something that I think most Cleveland fans have developed a pretty thick callus to, because this is something that people always talk about whenever Cleveland finds its hands on a star, ways to pry him out. Should the Browns trade him? Does this player want to be traded? I mean, we went through this with LeBron James. We went through this with Kyrie Irving. We went through this with Donovan Mitchell. And now Myles Garrett is the first star on the Cleveland Browns in quite some time that has reached that level to where these trade rumors continue to persist. So I don't blame most people in Cleveland for hearing this and going, yeah, you know what I mean? Just another rumor about the media wanting to trade Myles Garrett out of Cleveland. What I want to do is try to look through that and see if there's any smoke, any real smoke, about why we're hearing so much rumors or so many rumors about Myles Garrett getting traded, and ask the question like, hey, is it realistic to think that Myles has less years on the Browns in his career than we think going forward? We'll talk about that and more in this video. But first, let me thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. Hey, let me talk to you about my sponsor for this year, PrizePicks. It's a fun way to win cash while you're watching your favorite teams. Forget complex betting rules. Their app is designed to be incredibly easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Speaking of, here are my picks for this upcoming NFL season. They have Myles Garrett at 14 sacks here. I think he will get more than 14 sacks. Joe Burrow at 3,875 passing yards. I think he'll be a 4,000-yard passer. I'm going to go with more. They have Derrick Henry at 1,224 yards. I'm going to go less than that. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You can follow me on the app at KWEN_C to see all of my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineups when you download the app using the link in the description. So the first question that you got to source out logically, right? Like, you got to just use regular logic, right? Why now? Why are we hearing all of this smoke now? Not last year when he needed a new contract and he was going to sign a new contract when he had a little bit more life. Why are we hearing it now? I think there are multiple reasons for it. One, I do think there's legitimate tension between Myles and the Cleveland Browns. Now, I don't think this is like Myles won't report to training camp level tension, but there is some tension there. Myles wants to be on a competitive team. The Cleveland Browns are trying to build a competitive team, but they're not where Myles wants them to be. And, you know, I think if you're the Browns, you wish Myles was more accepting of the program, right? More of the Joe Bitonio variety who will just get along, right? Myles kind of takes a different approach. He believes in putting pressure on the organization. He talks about this when he talked about like how he's inspired by LeBron. If you remember when LeBron was here, for better or worse, LeBron was always putting pressure on the organization and always making it clear that he will leave if he has to when he came back to Cleveland that second time. So that's kind of, I think, just the natural tension that's going to exist when you have a superstar player, a legitimate superstar player, one of the best players of his generation, but he's on a team that does not give him an outlet for success on the football field. Like, I don't care what position it is. I don't care who the player is. If Myles Garrett were a quarterback and as good at quarterback as he is, and the Browns' record was what it was, he'd be frustrated. There would be legitimate tension between him and the organization. I think it's foolish to ignore that tension exists. there is legitimate tension there. And look, I know people are going to go, well, he's getting paid and all of this stuff, but like you as regular fan aren't happy with the state of the Cleveland Browns. Me as guy who covers the Cleveland Browns, not happy with the state of the Cleveland Browns. Why is it that Myles Garrett is prohibited from having this feeling, right? Like, I think it's obvious, right? That doesn't mean that just because there's tension between the front office and Myles, that 100% Myles is going to leave or whatever it is. It is possible, and I know this is a crazy thought, that you could do this thing called conflict resolution in sports. It's happened before where, hey, guy has problem with team listens to problem, team eventually fixes problem, team keeps player. That's happened before. I think it happened with Kobe Bryant, right? There was a lot of tension between the Lakers and Kobe when Kobe was scoring 81. But, he was playing with Smush Parker, and they weren't winning many games. And he was very frustrated. Eventually, the Lakers made some moves to get more competitive. And right now, the Cleveland Browns and Myles Garrett, I think, are firmly in their Kobe after the Shaq era with Myles. And keep in mind, like, Kobe had them 2-3 championships to lean back on, to be comfortable with. Myles Garrett's in this situation, and he doesn't have but only one playoff win to his name. So even more frustration there. But, like, that's what I see this as. There is tension. There is a possibility that the Browns could get a good enough deal to move him. But I don't think anything is imminent, right? I think people are trying to convince you that stuff's imminent. I don't think we're close to imminent. If you also look at this from the Browns' perspective, the timing of Myles' career and where the Browns are, it can get pretty spooky if you're the Cleveland Browns, right? Because as much as Myles in his career, the Browns aren't matching what he would like his timeline to be. I'm pretty sure Myles would love to be competing for championships right now. If you're the Browns and you have Myles, supernovaing, right, like just being a superstar, you also look at his age and realize like he's close to 30. I think he's almost 30 or 30 right now. And you expect to be competitive and like you hope, you're a wild card team this year. And then after that year, maybe you can transition to being a legitimate contender, but you're about a year or two away. Myles will be about 32 years old. And you're wondering like, how well does he match up to that timeline, given that by the time he's 32, you're going to have to give him another big contract and you're going to sign him from when he's 32 to probably when he's 35 or 36. Does that match up with the Cleveland Browns and what they want to do? See, this is awkward for both sides right now, which is why I think you're hearing all the smoke about trades. I think if you're the Browns, you're exploring what your options could be and just seeing what doors could be opened if you have to open those doors. And if you're Myles, you're doing the same thing because you're both in a spot where you're not the happiest with where you are and the time is not matching up as cleanly as you want it to be. It does not mean that you have to do something right now and panic and just make a big trade for no good reason. And I want to make that clear. But there's underlying tension right now, just naturally, that is driving these rumors. It's not completely bullshit. But ultimately, that's not going to determine if Myles Garrett gets traded. What's going to determine if Myles Garrett gets traded is very simple. Does it make sense to Cleveland, right? We got to remember, this is the NFL at the end of the day. A trade only happens if it makes sense for the team with the player that people want. You're not forced to do anything in the NFL. Players don't have that kind of leverage. This is not the NBA. Just because Myles wants to go does not mean that you have to trade him. We proved that last year. Myles wanted to trade. We said, no, here's some more money. He took the money, right? The question really is, like, is there a deal to trade Myles Garrett right now for the Cleveland Browns that makes sense? And I think that's the tough part right? If the Browns aren't going to trade him, because they're definitely not going to trade him before June 1st, right? The way that the money lines up, it's prohibitive to trade him before June 1st. So if the Browns trade Myles Garrett, they're not going to get picks in this year's draft. They're going to get picks in 2027's draft. So the price for Myles Garrett right now would be the same if you were to trade Myles Garrett during the trade deadline and if you were to trade Myles Garrett after the season. Hell, it might be even more expensive because Myles could have another 20-plus sack season with this defensive roster, which begs the question, what kind of deal would have to exist for the Cleveland Browns to be in a rush to do this? And I think that's the reason why we won't see a trade this offseason, in my humble opinion. This is just my thoughts here. There isn't a trade package that I have seen that makes sense for the Cleveland Browns to agree to. Keep in mind, again, you can't include 2026 draft picks in a trade for Myles Garrett because he would have to be traded post June 1st. And that's an important piece to this. This isn't the Micah Parsons situation where Micah wasn't going to play with the Cowboys another season because he didn't have a contract with them, right? This is a completely different situation. Myles Garrett is under contract for the next few years. So if you're going to trade him for 2027 draft picks, you probably would want to know where those draft picks are going to sit if you're going to do it, right? Like, especially if that's going to be a huge selling point to the trade that you're going to get, or at least if they're going to offer you somebody else's picks or something like that, that you can know where those picks are. Because if you trade them before the 2026 season, then obviously you won't know when those 2027 draft picks are going to hit. Also, if you wait till the offseason, it's possible that more teams end up with multiple first-round picks in 2027. So, like, if you look at this from the Browns' perspective, if your goal is to get the best draft haul possible, you don't have to do that from June 1st to the start of the season. It would actually make more sense to just let him play out this year and then see what teams are willing to offer to get him in the next offseason, because I don't think Myles' value is going to diminish over this year, right? You can say, well, maybe he can get injured, but even an injured Myles Garrett is going to get the maximum you can get for a trade for an edge rusher. So, like, I don't think it really matters. And then you have to remember that Myles has a no trade clause. So not only do the Browns have to have this trade make sense, but it has to be to a location that Myles agrees to go to. It's just too many hurdles to clear right now. It doesn't make as much sense. That's why I don't think it's going to happen right now. Another reason why I don't think this is going to happen is, like, the Browns front office right now, they don't have the goodwill to make a move like this and survive. Long story short, I talked about this in a video I did earlier today where I said the Browns need to win games to fix the quarterback position. And one of the reasons I said that was because the Browns desperately need some goodwill, right? Like, they have a negative balance of will with the fan base, with ownership, internally, externally, in the locker room. They need to develop some goodwill. That shit does matter when it comes to being able to see out a plan long term, right? And if you're going to trade Myles Garrett, that is a ultra long term plan, especially if you're Andrew Berry and you're pulling the trigger on a trade like Myles Garrett. Because if that's the case and, like, you know, you're forced to trade Myles, you might as well resign on the spot if you do it before this season, because you're going to get fired at the end of the year or maybe during the middle of the year, right? The Browns don't have the credibility to pull that off. Maybe if the Browns can win some games this year, people will feel much better about them. And then if the Browns trade them, and let's say Andrew Berry has two great draft classes back to back, right? The 2026 class is just as good as the 2025 class. And then the next offseason, you trade Myles Garrett. Right? So before the 2027 draft, you trade Myles Garrett, you get a bunch of picks. All of a sudden, how people feel about that trade, especially locally, internally, in that building, will be a lot different because now there's a lot of confidence about how you're going to use those draft picks. If you trade Myles Garrett right now, people aren't going to have a positive reaction to that. And this is not a team that can continue to afford to do things that make people have negative reactions. And again, I go back to the Micah Parsons thing, why this is so different than the Micah Parsons thing last year. There's nothing motivating the Browns to make a move right now. With Micah Parsons, the contract was the motivating factor for them to make a move now. And they panicked and they made a move when they really shouldn't have. And they spent the whole year regretting making that move because they traded Micah Parsons and became one of the worst defenses in football. The Browns have watched that. They have seen that mistake. They probably aren't eager to repeat it. And luckily for the Cleveland Browns, there is nothing forcing them to make a move. Everything says that you can wait. You can wait and get a better deal. Even if you do want to trade Myles Garrett, don't have to do it right now. You don't have to do this early. One of the most insane offers that we can fathom for Myles. We're talking about 3 first-round picks, like a quarterback, like a second-round pick, and then maybe some players on top of it, right? Like just an incredible haul you can't say no to. A price that is unfathomable for the Cleveland Browns to say no to. Then I don't really see the reason for the Browns to make the move right now, right? They can't do it until after June 1st, so they're not going to get extra picks in this year's draft. They're only going to get extra picks in 27, 28, and 29. The value of Myles Garrett is not dropping rapidly, and even if Myles Garrett sustains a significant injury, his value is still going to remain the same as far as trades go because he's still Myles Garrett and he hasn't had that many injuries. Then you also have to factor in that wherever you trade him has to be somewhere where Myles also approves, so another hurdle to get over. Yes, there's real tension between Myles and the Browns. Yes, Myles is frustrated that the Browns aren't where he wants them to be. And if you're the Browns, the more time that goes on while you're in this rebuild and the older Myles gets, the combination of those two things, the more there is a sweet spot that is created for a Myles Garrett trade. But we're not in that sweet spot yet because the Browns don't have to do this. They don't benefit from doing it super early. And they don't really have the credibility right now to survive a Myles Garrett trade and get to the benefit of trading Myles Garrett, which is those extra years of first-round picks. Maybe if they have another excellent draft in 2026, they win some games in 2026, they can make a move on Myles, and then people can say, hey, look how good Andrew Berry's been drafting. Those 3 first-round picks could be worth it in the long term. But right now, they don't have that credibility. Could it happen? I think as soon as next year, maybe. But right now, I don't see it as a realistic possibility. But let me know what you think, because this is ultimately just my opinion. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.